All right, to this story now, the corruption case involving parliamentarian, or rather former parliamentarian, Vincent Smith has been postponed to the 19th of April 2023 for pre-trial. Smith also faces charges of tax fraud and money laundering relating to Bosasa contracts. Bank statements show he allegedly received cash transfers into his bank account from Bosasa. He also failed to disclose taxable income with 28 million for his company from March 2009 to July 2018. Our reporter Moloko Moloto joins us now with the very latest. Good morning, Moloto. Court has adjourned with the matter now coming back in April. Just talk us through today's proceedings.
Good morning, Fundo. The proceedings in the High Court in Johannesburg today, they were quite short, I must indicate. I don't think it took more than 5 minutes. And this was because there was an agreement between the state as well as the defense that the matter should be postponed, as you said, to next year, April. This will be for pre-trial purposes. But we know that Mr. Vincent Smith has appeared before the Zondo Commission, and we have heard from the Mr. Agridzi, who has confessed that he actually was bribing, and Bosasa was bribing Mr. Smith. And this is why today we find this matter before the courts. But let me bring into this conversation Sindisiwe Sebuka. She is the national spokesperson for the NPA's ID, the investigative directorate. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. Maybe if you can paraphrase the key or main charges that Mr. Smith faces in this court.
Okay, he faces two, he's got corruption as well as tax fraud charges. The first corruption charges stem from what we're alleging is the gratification or bribe that we're alleging he receives from Bosasa and or Angelo Agridzi to the tune of over 800,000 for security upgrades. The second tranche of charges, which is the tax fraud charges, relate to over 20 million of undisclosed taxes for his company Euroblitz, as well as his personal capacity for just under a decade. We're saying it was from 2019 up until 2018 that he should have disclosed to the taxman. So those two matters, working with SARS, were able to bring this matter to this particular court.
So if I understand you correctly, the corruption matter relates specifically to the fence that was erected at his Roodepoort home. What about the other payments that we have had before the State Capture Commission that he received?
So that will be ventilated in court when trial starts as to exactly the perimeters of what our charges are about. Yes, it was for the security upgrades. It will also be clarified what of the upgrades we're alleging that he particularly benefited. So what we must also state is that irrespective of the values included in this particular matter, according to the ID, if we're successful, 15 years is 15 years.
Now, how confident are you? I'm sure Mr. Smith will argue that there was no corruption here. We have heard him saying that it was a loan and all that. Just how watertight is your case?
As the ID, the standard protocol is that we are dominus litis, meaning we bring matters to court. We are the custodians of the matters that we bring to court. However, it's not in our purview or in our scope of work to then determine what the presiding judge will then decide at that time of trial. We've brought this matter. We're behind investigations. We're behind our prosecutors that have brought the matter, but we can't then say or comment on the watertightness therein.
I agree. It certainly is up to the court to adjudicate, but you should also, I assume, not bring a matter before the courts if you're not sure about its tightness, isn't it?
That's why we always make sure that we have got checks and balances. You would know that at the ID, there's rigorous processes before matters are brought to court. You'd know that recently the NP also implemented a peer review session where before matters are brought to court, that amongst the peers in that particular aspect of law, which is corruption and fraud, we then punt it and play it before them, and then they also advise. So where we're currently saying we're behind the investigators, we're behind the prosecutors and this particular matter.
Let us now talk about the Bosasa and Agridzi. We know Mr. Watson is late now. Are they part and parcel of this particular court process that Mr. Smith is facing, considering that where there's a corruptee, there would have been a corruptor?
So To take this matter a few steps back, rather, when we enrolled this matter, it was actually Mr. Angelo Agriti and Vincent Smith that were standing in the dock side by side in Palmeridge. We then took a decision when we saw that the health or alleged health of Mr. Angelo Agriti, so from medical records that we've received, was allegedly deteriorating. So we saw that in order to allow for Mr. Vincent Smith's constitutional right of a speedy trial, that we then bring an application to separate the trial of the two accused. Hence, Mr. Vincent Smith is standing alone here in the High Court, and Mr. Angelo Agriti's matter is still before the Palmeridge Specialized Crimes Court. With that said, this matter will then go and proceed alone. He's the only accused in this matter. However, the information as to what transpired, who allegedly bribed who, will be ventilated in this court, and that other matter will be dealt with separately.
All right. Ms. Sindisiwe Sebuka speaks for the Independent Investigative Directorate, the ID there. And as we heard, this matter will now be back in this very same court next year in April.